Hello there students and welcome to this programming tutorial on the Python programming language. We're going to look at the basics of Python and in particular we're going to look at data types. Now in order for you to write your code we need to write it in an IDE, which stands for Integrated Development Environment, and that's where we as programmers write our code. You can head over to the Python website and download Python 3.9.0, which is the latest release as of recording this video, or you can head over to a Python online IDE, which is free, and you can type in and write your code in the Python file and then produce it. It produces it in the shell when you run it. I'm going to use Visual Studio Community Edition 2019, which also comes with Python. And I'm using that because that's what we use in college. And here is Visual Studio. So I've just created a new project and I'm going to go down and I'm going to select Python. And then I'm just going to select a console application, which is the top one in my list. It just says Python application, a project for creating a command line application. So all I've got to do is click next. And I'm going to call this data types. So give it a name and make sure that your location saves it in the correct place. So I'm just going to go to my desktop and I'm going to head over and I'm just going to save it in that folder there. And then I click create in the bottom corner. And this is my IDE, my Integrated Development Environment. And what you'll notice is that I already have numbers on there. Now, if you don't have numbers on yours, you can go to Tools, you can go to Options, you can scroll a bit further down to Text Editor, click the drop down arrow, select all languages and make sure that line numbers are enabled. You also have the option here as well to change your environment from dark to light to blue to extra contrast blue, and you can do that and you can get it looking exactly how you want. But it's always important to have the line numbers on there because if you're working with someone or you're debugging it, it's important to give the line number. Now on the right hand side we have the Solution Explorer, which has got our Python file here, which is called datatypes.py, which means it's a Python file. And you can add lots of other files in there as well. And as we go through these tutorials, you're going to build projects with multiple files in them. Down here we have the properties of the file, and we have the toolbox on the left hand side, and this little window here is the quick view window. So that shows your entire code all the way down, and it's quite nice for viewing. So let's get started. Now, data types are really important in Python. We need to understand exactly what type of data we're using. So this is how you declare data types. Now what will happen is if I use something called a string, that's going to be multiple letters inside something called a variable. And a variable is, think of it like a small bit of memory space. A box, if you will. And inside that box is going to contain some information. So I've got something called name underscore string, and I'm going to assign it a value using the equal symbol. So equals means assign, and I'm going to say assign that John. Now you'll notice that John is a string of letters and it's got speech marks around it. And look at the color change. So John is a string, a character of J, O and N, and the speech marks tell the computer that it is a string, and that is then assigned into this memory space, so this box called name string. So once I've done that, I've actually created a variable there, and I've made that variable accept type string. And what you'll do is you'll see if I use the word print followed by a bracket and bracket, and I put in there name underscore string, when I execute and run my program by clicking the start button up here, you'll notice what happens. It produces the string John. And it's as simple as that. We've covered quite a few things there in just a few lines of code. So we've got a variable, that's memory space. Think of it like a box in memory. And we've called it name underscore string. We have used the equal symbol to assign it or pass it some information. and on the right hand side is the information that we're passing into the variable. So John in speech marks. And then we've got a print statement that actually prints out the variable name to our console. And there you can see John has been printed. And that's because John is the information held inside name string. So what if we just wanted one letter? Now, one letter on its own is called a character. And a character can simply be defined as name underscore char. So char's the short variation. And we put in J there, one single character. And you can do the same. You can print it, name underscore char. It's always important to run our code just to make sure that things work properly. Now, Python will tell you, and the IDE will try to indicate where there is an error. And errors are represented by red lines. So if I had my characters, what about something called an integer? Okay, an integer is a whole number. So that's a number with no decimal places in it. And I can say age, for example, is 37. So I've assigned the age variable 37, the value of 37. Now, in other languages, I might have to declare what type of data I'm actually going to store in there. But Python's pretty clever. It passes the information over and changes the variable to accept integers, strings, characters, or whatever. Moving on from here, we have a value with a decimal point. Or that's also referred to as a fractional value. And we have something called cost. And let's say cost is £3.70 or 370 in total. Now there's no pound symbols there. If I was to add a pound symbol, that would have to become a string and I'd have to put speech marks around it. But at the moment, it's just 370. 370. And if you display this, print cost, hopefully we can see what happens here. Okay, cost is displayed, and look what happens to the 0. That is actually replaced by Python, so it actually removes the trailing zeros off the end of your numbers. And then the other main data type we have is something called a Boolean value. And these are very handy in programming, you see them everywhere. And the two pieces of information a Boolean can hold is true or false. So I can set my valid variable to true. And you'll see true, it changes its color to blue. And blue means that it's a key word. And I can print out there, I can print valid. So off we go, print valid out. Look at our outputs now. We've got John printed out at the top. We've got J. Then we've got true 3.7, which is our cost. And then I've got true down here, which is the value held inside valid. So far so good. No errors, my program runs okay. And what we can do as well, we can do some more advanced things with variables as well. If I wanted to save time, I could actually assign multiple values to variables, such as A, B, C. So 3 variables, A, B, and C, and assign them the values of 5, 3.2, and let's say hello. And there they are. So A should be assigned 5, 3.2 to B, and hello to C. And let's have a look then, shall we? So print, and I'm going to make this output a little bit more readable for the user. So let's say A is speech mark plus str, and you'll see this turn blue. So I'll explain what this does in just a second. So print B is space speech mark plus str B this time. And then third one, print C is space plus str C. Okay, now what happens here is we have a print function that actually outputs the information just like we did before, but this time I've written in a string myself. So I've said A is followed by a space, and then a plus, and then something else. So the plus here will do something called concatenation, and that's the merging of two variables or two pieces of information in a single line. And I've got str, which means convert whatever is inside the brackets into a string. So I need to do this in order to concatenate with another string data type. So A will be converted into a string, B will be converted into a string only briefly, and C is already a string anyway. So let's see what happens when I run my program. I click start at the top or press F5 and I get A is 5, B is 32 and C is hello. And that's because A holds 5, B holds 3.2 and C holds hello. Perfect. So we can do multiple assignment on one line. So another way to do concatenation is to combine variables using commas. So I can say print B colon. And now you'll notice that when I use a comma, I don't have to convert my variables to strings anymore. And I like to use commas because it saves me having to mess around thinking about all the different data types, and I can just run this again and see what this produces. It says B is 3.2 and John. So B is 3.2 and John. And that's what it produces. So Python's quite powerful and it can do lots of interesting things, and you're not expected to know everything about Python because I don't think anybody does. Even the creator probably doesn't know absolutely everything that's out there because it's continually being created, added to, new versions are out all the time. But what about something like print John? That's just going to print John out, isn't it, to the console? But what if I multiply that by 20 and I run this again? What you'll get is the situation where you've got 20 Johns. So it'll multiply the string on the same line 20 times. And you can even increase that number and go crazy. Run the program again. You'll notice now I get 200 Johns. Now where you might use that and where that might be useful is beyond me, but you might use it. And what if you were ever writing something in Python and you wanted to know what data type you are using? You might use something like the keyword type in order to print out the name string variable and say, well, what data type is name string and what data type is age? Well, we're not sure. So, let's see if the computer can actually tell us. And we say here we've got our 200 John still, but down here we've got the name string variable is of type string and the age variable is of type integer. So that type followed by brackets and put your variable inside the brackets, that can be quite useful in Python as well. So don't forget, we have our main data types of strings, characters, integers, fractional values. We have booleans, valid, which is true or false, and we can also assign multiple data types into multiple variables, and then we can print them out. We can merge things together on our print statements using commas or pluses, and we can even multiply strings if we wanted to. And finally, our types can tell us what data type the variable is holding. And there we go. That's our first video on our Python tutorial. Join me in the next one for a little bit more Python exploration.